most North Texas school districts are holding class today despite the cold weather. That has some parents upset who thought school should be canceled. Tiffany Liu is live this morning in Dallas with how districts do make that decision whether to hold school or not. You know, it really does vary, especially considering whether you're further up north like Salina or maybe you had more flurries out in Weatherford. There's a lot of things to consider for these school districts.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There are so many things to consider, and these superintendents, they really don't take it lightly. You know, this morning I was in Fort Worth watching kids go to school. Some of them had to wait at the bus stops. Some of them, their parents drove them to the bus stop and waited for the bus to get there, and then they quickly scurried onto the bus when it was finally there. And some of them waited in between doorways of an apartment complex, of a church. It was just so cold out there. The good news, though, now those kids are inside those classrooms and they are warm in the heater, where I am not, where I really wish to be. But I did talk to the superintendent this morning in the DFW area, and he told me, like we mentioned, there's a lot to take into consideration when you are deciding whether to keep schools open or actually close them for a day due to the weather. Now, he told me that they have to consider road conditions. There's often bus drivers or teachers who live out of town. They also think about parents who still have to work and rely on school during those work hours. Districts, obviously, they try to make the decision as quickly as possible. And for those heavy snow days, it tends to be easier to make that decision. But really for days like today, it's more difficult because they had to sort of see how this morning looked. And for the Wiley superintendent, David Vincent, he told me really it's always safety that comes first.
I start talking to superintendents, we start looking at the weather, we start talking to weather experts, and really kind of convening our options. I was up at 3, and I drove roads, and I drove to the parking lots, and I drove to make sure the biggest, most treacherous intersections that we have. And in this particular case, everything was completely dry, really cold, but completely dry.
So Superintendent Vincent got up at 3 in the morning, drove around to make sure that the roads were clear so that his students were safe, the parents were safe, his staff, his bus drivers, that everybody could go to school okay. And he saw that the roads were clear, like he mentioned, and conditions were dry, so they did remain open today. Like Dallas, Fort Worth, all these districts, a lot of them remained open this morning. Of course, this is a day-by-day situation. We're going to continue to monitor the situation. If anything changes with school closures, we're of course going to bring that to you. And one more thing to note is that parents, like we mentioned, some of them upset that schools didn't close today, but really at the end of the day, it's up to you. If you don't want to send your child to school, you don't have to. Let's send it back to you in the studio, Kara.